Dearest gentle listeners, you are listening to the Ladies Bridgerton, the talk of the town. We are your effervescent host, your neighborhood-friendly Kiwi, Tash from Middle-earth, New Zealand.
And Patty, Regency romance enthusiast, whose current chapter of her story takes place in Ohio.
Settle down onto your favorite settee as we delve into the lives of the elite and illustrious ladies, lords, and royalty of the ton. This Bridgerton podcast is two friends talking romance, symbolism, Easter eggs, and deep diving into the connections of your favorite characters. This podcast covers both books and TV series and therefore will contain spoilers.
Today, gentle listeners, our episode is going to be a little bit different. With the rousing news of season 4 over the past few weeks, we've decided to take a tangent from pollen and talk all things season 4. We'll begin first by doing a summary of the Julia Quinn novel that this season will be based on, An Offer from a Gentleman. We'll dive into all of the information we've gathered from Shondaland, interviews, and the wider Bridgerton universe, and discuss scenes from this book that have already been used, changes we think they'll make, and some of our musings will be what we know, some will be what we wish, some will be what we forecast.
Now we must make haste into today's episode. For anyone not wishing to hear a recap of this book, please skip to 22 minutes and 25 seconds to jump straight into this episode instead. We're going to do a full recast of the book, and for anyone who does want to go ahead and read the book at some future point, go and read that first and then pop back once you're all caught up and then have a listen to this episode, as we will try and put in timestamps at some point to tell you when we have finished reading the book. So let's begin the recap. The book starts out with the narration of Lady Whistledown article declaring just how much of an esteemed bachelor Benedict was, how he attended every ball and event and yet spent every moment just staring at the door as if waiting for someone. Then begins the prologue about Miss Sophie Beckett. Sophie Beckett had been dropped off at Penwood Park at the age of 3 by her grandmother. The Earl had just taken her in, knowing that she was his illegitimate daughter. He told the staff a lie about her parentage, but everyone knew what her true parentage was. One day, her father decided to marry, and with his new wife, Araminta, came 2 daughters from a previous husband, Posy and Rosamond. Instantly upon meeting Sophie, Araminta deduced that Sophie was not just a ward of the Earl, but in fact was his daughter. She was enraged by this knowledge and immediately took her daughters away without introducing them to Sophie. Sophie tried to smile after them, and Posy attempted to smile back, but Rosamond, deducing that her mother was unhappy about the girl, sneered and ignored her, and as it went. Sophie, unaware of the growing tensions, was still desperately excited by the thought of having sisters to love and to play with and having a real family. Sophie did not get to dream for long though, as merely the next morning, Araminta pulled Sophie aside and told her that she was an unwelcome guest in the house, and although her husband would not kick Sophie out, she was nothing but a bastard, and she needed to remember her place. She was told to never speak to the girls outside of lessons. The girls followed suit and were also cruel to Sophie, though Sophie could tell that Posy did not wish to be, although Rosamond took great joy in being just as cruel as her mother. Not many years later, the Earl suddenly dropped dead. In his will, he left funds to see the raising of and dowries for Posy, Rosamond, and Sophie too. The Earl had a sneaky clause saying that Araminta would have a yearly income of merely £2,000 unless she also takes care of Sophie until her 20th birthday, in which case she will receive a yearly income of £6,000. Now, Araminta did not want to take on Sophie and very much loathed her, but the idea of having £4,000 additionally was too much to pass up. We have a time jump here where we learn that although Araminta kept Sophie, she treated her like a maid, scullery maid, lady's maid, all except that she was unpaid, so technically her title would be slave.
And we have the night of the masquerade. Sophie is pulled in several directions, taking care of for Araminta, Rosamond, and Posy. We see how Posy is treated as she's asking Sophie's opinion on her costume, mermaid costume for the Bridgerton masquerade, and she is put down by Araminta and Rosamond both, but Sophie is always trying to be kind to Posy. Araminta has set her sights on one of her daughters marrying one of the Bridgerton brothers. And in this book, Colin is not married, guys, so it's Benedict or Colin. As Araminta, Posey, and Rosamund leave for the masquerade ball, the housekeeper comes in, Miss Gibbons, and pulls Sophie aside and says, "You don't have much time." They take her up to her room and they have everything laid out for her to dress up and go to the Bridgerton's masquerade ball. And she decides to do it. She's going to have one night where she's completely unrecognizable. So she wants to go have a night of fun and pretend like she is what she is, which is an earl's daughter. Benedict arrives at the ball and his mother immediately wants him to dance with Penelope Featherington, who is a wallflower, which we see that a lot in the books where Violet all of her sons to dance with Penelope. We don't see that in the show. So he starts to approach Penelope, but he's distracted and he feels this like premonition feeling that he gets, and he turns around and he is mesmerized by this beautiful woman in silver, which our heroine, Sophie. And he just can't believe the simple happiness she's exuding being at this ball. He completely forgets about Penelope and approaches her, but not before she's surrounded by other suitors. But he brazenly tells the other suitors that she's already promised the next dance to him, and she goes along with it. He asks her to do the waltz with him, and then she admits she doesn't know how to dance. Benedict heads towards a private terrace to be able to teach her how to dance and to be alone, because we know those Bridgerton boys like to get alone with ladies. But he's interrupted by Colin, who is upset that he hurt Penelope's feelings, and Colin had to dance with Penelope to make up for it. It is as Benedict and Colin are jesting with one another that Sophie realizes her mystery man is in fact a Bridgerton, not just any Bridgerton, but Benedict Bridgerton. And mind you, everybody who doesn't recognize any of the Bridgertons behind a mask are just calling, "I know you're a Bridgerton. Which one are you?" So it's important that she recognizes him as Benedict Bridgerton. Colin takes his leave, and Sophie and Benedict spend the night sharing their souls, even though Sophie guards her identity. As the night goes on, the desire between them grows. Sophie asks him to dance with her alone on the secret terrace. With so much passion and unspoken understanding passing through them, the moment finally culminates in a heady, after which Benedict tells Sophie that he wants to call on her tomorrow. He wants her future, all of her. He wants to marry her. She begs him to stop speaking because she has already realized her feelings for him, and she knows the future will be torturous if he finds out who she is. And just like, the Cinderella story, the clock strikes 12 and she realizes she's going to be late. She has to leave at 12 so that the carriage can be back in time for Araminta and the sisters.
Sophie runs to the carriage, but is chased by Benedict. Sophie runs right into Araminta, who thankfully doesn't recognize her. Right as she thinks she may not get away, Lady Danbury engages Benedict, allowing Sophie to slip away. Heartbroken, Benedict realizes that he is holding her gloves, which were initialed and had a family crest on them. The next day, Benedict confides in his mother, which he was very tentative about doing, knowing that his mother would immediately jump on the fact of him getting married to someone. His mother informs him which family the gloves belong to and where to find them. While he is on his way over, Araminta confronts Sophie about her scuffed shoes. Unaware of how it happened, Sophie had borrowed Araminta's shoes to match with her fancy dress the night before and was unaware that she had scuffed them. Benedict arrived at the house then and met with the ladies of the house. Upon meeting the two younger girls, he knew immediately that neither of them was his lady in silver. Through some unfortunate questions, the cunning Araminta realizes that it was Sophie that he was looking for. Benedict leaves the estate, not having found what he was looking for, though knowing he's heading in the right direction. Araminta races upstairs and confronts Sophie, kicking her out of the house. It cuts back to Benedict and him attending a party that he is not much interest in attending, but he is bored, so attends anyway. Benedict quickly surmised that this is not the sort of debaucherous party that he wants to be at and tries to leave, but needs to thank his host before leaving.
So at this party that Benedict's at, we now know that it's 2 years in the future. We know that Sophie had taken 2 shoe clips from Araminta's shoes and pawned them so that she could make her way out to the country to find a position. She found employment with the Cavenders and was enjoying a peaceful existence until their son Philip returns from abroad from his grand tour and begins trying to harass her in a inappropriate manner. On the night of the party, Cavenders had gone away and Philip was throwing the party. Since his mother was out of residence, they were very much harassing Sophie all day with more vigor. She decided the home was no longer safe and she couldn't remain at the house. So she was going to quit on the spot and walk into town. She gathered her belongings and made it to the driveway when Philip spotted her. She tried to run, but he caught up with her, and he and two other friends who are very drunk, the three of them assess her and they are talking about playing with her, and it would end up being she would be essayed or worse. Then she hears another male voice and is really frightened that it's going to be four men on her. But then she recognizes the voice as Benedict's, which creates a whole other version of fear. Benedict threatens the men and takes her from the party. He actually says he's going to take all three of them on in a fight if they don't give her up. They get into his phaeton and horses and they start having small talk, introducing them. And she's wondering if and when Benedict's going to recognize her and recall their first meeting. He does believe she looks familiar, but he can't place her, and he's thrown off by the knowledge that she is a maid. They ride to his estate called My Cottage to stay the night before his intention was to take her into London to Bridgerton House to find Sophie a position in his family. Halfway to My Cottage, a storm breaks out and soaks them to the bone, and it's very cold. Benedict had just gotten over a head cold, and it starts coming back and getting worse. By the time they reach the cottage, they find that the caretakers are not there, and Benedict is even sicker and becomes delirious with fever. In his delirium, he asks Sophie to kiss him, thinking she's the girl in silver. She is. Benedict did take some time to recover. And once he did, though, he still milked it. He stayed in bed so that Sophie would remain by his side. He had the caretakers treating her as a guest rather than a servant. She deemed herself as a maid, though, and wanted to keep her place. And he kept getting more brazen in his flirtation, which did make her uncomfortable because she was trying to keep their separation of status. One day, though, he realized how much he needed her, and he made her leave the room, and then he escaped so that he could take his version of a cold shower in his lake to quell the signs of his passion, because it's now early spring and he knows the water will be icy cold. By chance, Sophie decides to take a day and actually do something for herself, because she knows when she takes on a position she'll be working again. So she walks out to the same lake, the forest, and she comes upon a naked Benedict in the lake, and she decides instead of leaving, she's going to take her fill of his beautiful form that is covered up to just above the important stuff by the water. And she actually wishes for a big wind to come and take the water away. But Benedict has the tingly feeling again, and he realizes that Sophie's out there, and he calls out to her. She comes out of the clearing, and they get into a fight, which results in some passion. And he starts kissing her, and they end up on the ground rolling around. But she breaks it off because she remembers what it was like growing up as the daughter of a mistress and what that brought upon her. So when Benedict propositions her and gives her the offer to be his mistress, it increases the veracity of this argument.
Sophie tries to leave the residence, but Benedict threatens that if she leaves, he will tell the magistrate that she stole from him, forcing her hand to head back to London with him to his mother's estate. Sophie begins working for Lady Bridgerton as the lady's maid to Francesca, Eloise, and Hyacinth, but is fearful of being discovered in London by her mother-in-law Araminta. Benedict uses Sophie's proximity in the Bridgerton household to constantly find her and coerce her into being his mistress. This is definitely not one of his finest moments. You could definitely take a book out of Colin's
consent.
Consentless. Cue.
Is there a C word for like a type of girl trying to take Colin coaching lessons
consent
on consent?
Consent with Colin.
Yeah. His YouTube channel, Consent with Colin. Like Sheldon on Big Bang Theory is fun with flags. Special lessons for my brothers.
They definitely need it. Sophie settles into being a lady's maid for the Bridgerton girls, but Violet almost treats her as a guest of the house. It is clear that Violet knows Benedict has an attachment to her. but just to not what extent. One day, Sophie goes to take a walk, but upon leaving Bridgerton house, promptly finds herself confronted with Araminta right next door. It is then that she recalls that Araminta had moved in next to the Bridgertons. Posey goes to join her mother in the carriage when she stumbles and comes face to face with Sophie. Posey holds her tongue and hops into the carriage without revealing the knowledge that Sophie is right there. Sophie is frozen in place until Benedict happens upon her. He can see that she is shaken, and he takes her down the road to his townhouse, promising that it is just to calm her down. They begin talking, and realizing just how deeply Sophie knows his soul, and realizing how deeply he loves her, Benedict cannot withhold his passion anymore and seduces Colin. I'm just confused because they have taken the Colin scene and given it to, Benedict. Yeah. So my brain's like, Colin!
Colin!
Realizing just how deeply Sophie knows his soul and realizing how deeply he loves her, Benedict cannot withhold his passion anymore and seduces Sophie on his sofa in the sitting room. Just before this occurs, Sophie had made commentary to him about how he had the soul of an artist and remarks just how good his art is. Sounds very similar. Season 3. Benedict and Sophie find bliss together despite the small space of the Sophie. God damn it.
The small space of the Sophie.
Well, I mean, it was a small space.
She was a virgin.
Oh, my brain is not complying with me today.
That's perfection, though. Like the small space of the Sophie.
You know what? I think I just leave some of these Freudian slips in because they just kind of add to it. Benedict and Sophie do this today. Whew, calming fingers. Benedict and Sophie find bliss together despite the small space on the sofa. Afterwards, they fell into a slumber. Upon waking, Benedict tells Sophie that he will send a footman along to grab her belongings from Bridgerton house, falsely assuming that she will now be his mistress. Sophie stands tall though, and despite her momentary lapse, she will not allow herself to be his mistress and risk getting pregnant to him and have her child raised as a bastard as she was.
Sophie returns to Bridgerton house and does not see Benedict for a full 2 weeks. In that time, they both recluse themselves off, worrying the family. Violet forces Sophie to rejoin the family for afternoon tea. Sophie is quiet at first until the siblings are each talking about their brother's different attributes and skills, and they couldn't name a single one for Benedict. Sophie then gets defensive and tells everyone that Benedict is an artist and brags about how good he is, much to the surprise of everyone in the room. Benedict arrives at the house and ends up speaking with his mother. He asks her all about falling in love and their parents' lives together, and finishes by asking Violet what would happen if he were to fall in love with someone from the servants' class or lesser social stand. Violet, being the loving and supportive mother that she is, tells him that she will support him through anything, but cautions him that it will not be an easy path forward. Benedict then, seeming resolved to ask Sophie to marry him, goes upstairs to find Sophie. Not long after, some family cousins arrive and Hyacinth talks Sophie into helping her take care of the 4 children. They're playing a game of blind man's bluff where Sophie is required to be blindfolded. And I'm going back to he goes upstairs. He wasn't going to go upstairs. He was going to leave. And Eloise was in cahoots with her mother to get him upstairs, which that's not Eloise's cup of tea in the show. So I think I want to see how that. So they're playing blind man's bluff, and they say that Sophie has to be the blind man and is required to be blindfolded. Benedict walks into the room and is hit with the realization that he's staring at the silver. He's never noticed it because Sophie had lost so much weight. Her hair was shorter and curlier. And because he'd always been looking at her full face, now with the blindfold covering half of it, he is burning with rage to discover that Sophie has kept her true identity from him all along. Sound familiar? Yes. Benedict finds out Sophie's true parentage and the reasons why she will not sire an illegitimate child. Benedict, despite originally heading there to ask Sophie to marry him, has left in a blind rage to the point that he can't be near her. He leaves. Also, Sophie decides that she cannot stay at number 5 Bruton Street any longer and packs her bag to leave. First, though, she stops by the Dowager Lady Bridgerton to pay her respects and thank her for making her feel so welcome. It is then that Violet acknowledges that she knows about her and Benedict and expresses how She wishes Sophie could have been her daughter. Violet will not let Sophie leave the house without proper escort, as it is unsafe. She also wants to give her money. Sophie decides to wait out on the front steps of the house for the carriage to be brought around that Violet is having her leave in. Whilst waiting, Araminta spots her, and despite Sophie immediately running to avoid being connected to the Bridgertons, Araminta sends police after her, claiming that Sophie stole from her. The Bridgerton family are completely unaware of what has transpired right in front of their house, as by the time Violet brought the carriage around, Sophie was long gone. It is not until the next day that the young Bridgerton girls discover what transpired in front of their house in none other Lady Brown.
Sophie gets thrown in jail, where she is faced between the options of hanging or being exiled to Australia. Benedict, unaware of what has happened to Sophie, meets up with Colin for a round of fencing the next day. Colin picks up that Benedict is in a foul mood and guesses pretty astutely that something has transpired between Benedict and Sophie, stating that it was obvious that there were feelings between them. Colin encourages his brother to marry her despite the backlash from society. And so, Benedict heads to number 5 Bruton Street. Upon his arrival, his mother tells Benedict that Sophie has taken off with no trace, and it is not until the young Bridgerton girls run into the room with Lady Whistledown in hand that Benedict and Violet learn what has happened to Sophie. They promptly head to the jail. Sophie is told that she has a visitor, and despite desperately wishing for it to be Benedict, it is in fact Araminta, who confesses to Sophie that she has always hated Sophie because she represented the fact that Araminta could not provide the Earl, Sophie's father, an heir, and that she resented that he loved his daughter and forced Araminta to live with her. Sophie hears a scuffle in the background, then the sound of Benedict demanding to be let right through before he punched the warden in the face and forced his way through. Benedict tells the warden that Sophie is his fiancée and that she has been held there on false accusation. Just at the right time, Violet and then Posey turn up to back up Benedict's claims that Araminta is making up the whole story out of spite, and Posey, I know words, and Posey claims that it was actually she who had stolen the shoe clips all along and tells the warden to lock her up instead. That is when the magistrate turns up and demands to know Sophie's story before he will release her so that he might understand the truth of what is happening. Posey then comes out with another truth bomb, that Sophie's father, the late Earl, had in fact left her an inheritance in the form of a dowry in order to provide for her, which Araminta had stolen. Violet pays the magistrate and warden to leave them all alone, where Violet proceeds to threaten to have Araminta arrested if she does not tell everyone in town that Sophie was the ward of the late Earl and tell a lie that she comes from a distant cousin of him, giving Sophie legitimacy enough to allow Benedict to marry her. Sophie whispers in Violet's ear one last favor, to have Posey come and live with them. Also, otherwise, she will suffer at the hands of Araminta, as she has always done.
Afterwards, Benedict and Sophie head back to Benedict's house. Once there, on the sofa that only a few short weeks before they had made love on, Benedict declared himself and the full extent of his love for her. Benedict and Sophie get married, and whilst Araminta did spread the story that Sophie was of legitimacy, many people of the ton still didn't quite believe the story. Sophie and Benedict decided they would rather bask in the glory of their marriage in the peaceful countryside instead, where Benedict spent his days as a painter and Sophie often as the subject of his painting. But in the epilogue, Sophie was pregnant with their 5th child.
We get a second epilogue that is actually more based upon Posey than Sophie, so we haven't really included it, but it is quite a beautiful story, and Posey finds her own little piece of happiness in the end as well. So let's break down some of the scenes that we have from this book and what we already know has been used in season 3, because as we know, the books of book 3 and book 4 have been flipped. It was supposed to go An Offer from a Gentleman and then Romancing Mr. Bridgerton. They have flipped it the seasons around. So some of these scenes that have transpired won't really make sense to be happening in season 4, as Colin is now married, and they've actually used some of the scenes from this book and given it to Colin. Sofa.
Well, and they also gave the line from this book to Daphne in season
which was
1.
Surprising.
Like you told me that, and then I reread it or was listening to it on Audible. Only way I could get through it in time for us to do this. And I heard it. And I was like, man, what are they going to give him now? What are they going to give Benedict now? Yeah.
And because it's
giving away, Benedict says, I burn for you.
It was such a line in this book as well. And they gave it to Daphne. And I mean, I haven't listened to Daphne's book in quite a while. So, I mean, it might be in there as well. Julia Quinn did kind of double up on some names and some things a few times that she's, but, you know, I digress. There's a couple of things that are actually in multiple books.
Well, like the brothers talking and Colin saying he's not going to marry Penelope is in this book. More of the scene is in this book because you see it from the brothers' point of view because Benedict is on that side of the coin. But then in Romancing Mr. Bridgerton, you see it from her point of view. So that is in.
But I love that this one's from Benedict's point of view, not Colin's.
Yes.
And I kind of love that more because that line that you just said before, that Benedict looks into Penelope's eyes and realizes that Penelope is in love with Colin. And Benedict actually, I mean, this entire book happens because Benedict is so astute, and they don't make him that way in the series. He's so astute that he knows exactly what Sophie is thinking. He knows the action she's about to take. He picks up on the nuances. Like he picks up on things at the balls of different people. He is so attuned to people, and they've really, really swapped.
Yes, they gave that to
siblings.
Colin so much.
Yeah,
because that's kind of like Colin's whole thing is his people pleasing to feel like he's worthy to people. He learned how to really, like in trying to read his journals that they don't read out loud. He talks about tuning in to his partner, but really he tunes into everybody. And I love in this book, and I think this is something that they also gave to Colin, because Colin is supposed to be like representation of Edmund, friends to lovers kind of thing, that they kept saying that with Edmund, when he was speaking to you, you felt like you were the only person and it was very unusual. Benedict says it's very unusual that he could do that, considering Violet had to remind him that he never met Hyacinth. So really he only had to deal with 7, but still it's 7. But I think these are things that are from this book that actually became Colin trait because it worked for the story, for the show, for Colin and Penn, like being so attuned to people, their needs, putting their needs first, making them feel like the most important person in the room when he is communicating with them, conversing with them, like, because Penelope was going to be able to feel loved by him and to believe it. She was going to need to know he was paying attention because nobody else ever paid attention. Even though it ended up like being Bad News Bears, it took him finding out she was Whistledown to figure out he's always watching. He's always clocking her. But I think that I do like that some of these attributes were given to Colin for this season. And I think there's a lot in this book that's not going to work for season because it's already been done.
Do hope that we get Colin. So, the scene that Colin is interrupting. Benedict has just met Sophie. He's trying to take her to the private terrace to teach her how to dance. And he interrupts them like, "Excuse me, you have just snubbed my future wife. You have hurt her feelings in public. How dare you?"
He doesn't say that in the book. That's us saying it because he says, "You were supposed to dance with Penelope and you ignored her and you hurt her feelings. It's a good thing I was there." Yeah, it's a good thing I was there and I danced with her so that she wouldn't have to be hurt. Like he was defending Penelope long before. I mean, in the books, this is 8 years before he falls in love with her in their book. But yeah, he's defending Penelope even then.
Because in the books, he is very unaware of any feelings for a very, very long time. But you do get these wee snippets through some of the other books where it kind of shows you that although he wasn't in love with her, he definitely had a fondness for her and he was protective of her, and it was so beautiful.
Well, and I think like it'll make it even better now because the whole point of this interaction is for Sophie to see they're interacting with each other, the teasing and all that, and to realize that they are the Bridgerton brothers and they're members. And she guesses that they are Benedict and Colin from what she knows from Whistledown. And so they have to have that teasing Barbie kind of interaction. But now it's going to be like I think in Benedict seeing Sophie, I think he's going to be in a position where he's maybe like talking to Penelope or he's doing something for Penelope in some way that he snubs her, like not, and Colin being Colin has to go and be like, "You owe my wife an apology." Like, I'm going to search you out in this whole house.
You know what?
You owe
I
my wife
desperately
an apology.
want. I mean, this is true Tangent Queen-esque because this is not this book, this is not this season, it is way out there. I need the Paul Moore match from the epilogue of Romancing Mr. Bridgerton, I think it might be, where the Paul Moore match where
yes, where Penn doesn't play,
but she's the cheerleader to Colin and Anthony's like, excuse me, she's distracting your bread. And I think that is a perfect summation. And that is something that is still completely in line with all of their characters. And the Paul Moore match is it is a fan favorite kind of scene. So I really, really, really hope that we do get the Paul Moore match in next season.
And oh my gosh, that would just show how much in sync they are now because they had so much angst. Because their plan, it's so sneaky and devious because it's like she's distracting everyone else so Colin can finally win. Yes. Because it's always like that. Yes.
Crafty Colin becomes crafty pollen. So I just
crafty
had to
pollen.
But I love this moment because we have Colin, Benedict, and Sophie together, and this is one of those moments where Sophie realizes, hey, they are a real family. Like they jest, they joke, they're kind of barbing with each other, but it's not in a cruel way like that. She's always experienced Posey and Araminta and Rosamond. We were really trying to give a brief summary of the book, so we didn't go into a lot of the nuance of it. But basically, Rosamond is a very cruel character. I think if anyone has ever seen the Drew Barrymore movie Ever After, that is hands down the exact, like, that's those three characters.
Yeah.
These three characters
Posey's just here for the food.
Yes, Posey's just here for the food. Rosamond is that beautiful silk woven golden hair, thinks that, you know, everything revolves around her. She is an exact replica of her mother, Araminta, and Araminta has put all of her pennies, all of her energy.
Eggs are in Rosamond's basket.
Yeah, thinking that, well, Rosamond is so beautiful that surely she is going to make the most advantageous marriage and save them all from not poverty. She's not £6,000 a year. Keep in mind that in Pride and Prejudice, he's only
Bingley was 5,000.
Bingley was 5,000, and Mr. Darcy was 10,000 a year. She's getting 6,000 a year to live on, and she's like pennies.
Yeah, 10,000 a year, and he was like the richest man.
Yep.
And she's turning her nose up at. Well, I mean, she was only given 2,000. She only got the other 4 to take care of Sophie.
Yes, but she's basically saying that. Well, I don't know whether if she continued to get the additional 4 or whether she was down to the 2,000 now that Sophie was over the age of 20.
Yeah, she was only getting 2,000, but Sophie stayed because there's the devil you know and the devil you don't. Yeah. And she knew what her life was. She knew what it would be like living in this home. She knew the abuse she would go through, but she was really concerned with what if I leave, not knowing. The not knowing is what kept her there. She was so afraid of not landing on her feet. She knew Araminta wouldn't give her a reference, and that's the only place she'd ever worked her whole life.
I think it was more so that the servants were the only family she'd ever known. They were her true family, which is sad because Sophie, all she ever desperately wanted was she wanted those girls to be her sisters. She wanted Araminta to come in and for her dad to finally acknowledge her more so than just the 2 minutes that he gave her when he came back into town and he'd ask, you know, how's your education going? And she'd say, yeah, I'm doing really well in this and this and this. And he goes, that's great. All right, see ya. And that was the whole extent of their relationship. So
that sounds kind of familiar too with Simon, because Simon, like, the only thing his dad ever cared to hear about was his education, and was he advancing with his speech issues and stuff like that. So, you know, like, he liked hearing about his education, but he didn't want to know anything about him as a person. He was broken.
Yeah, I just watched that episode with my husband again, and he was like, God, that is so sad. I'm like, yeah, Roman, like, Bridgerton is not just smart. It has its true deep moments.
Everybody can relate to a character in Bridgerton because they all have some form of something like trauma or, you know, whatever that people are dealing with. Or, I mean,
being alive is trauma.
Yeah. And like, this season of the internet has said it, and we're talking about compiling and doing an episode about Colin, Eloise, and Francesca being ADHD, ADHD, and autistic on the spectrum, because they have a lot of the trait between the 3 of them. So there's just a little, and like, then there's something for everyone to relate to.
I'd like to dig into Portia as a narcissist at some point as well.
Yeah, narcissistic parent. And what it looks like, you have your classic, like, Penelope starts doing reactive abuse in season 3 because she no longer has any positive in her life when she's separated from them. So she starts engaging in reactive abuse to her mother and her sisters.
Speaking of, very much Araminta, Posey, and Rosamond's story is very similarly played out in Portia and her children, which is quite
Yes.
interesting that they've truly given a lot of the character arcs from this book to Penelope and Colin's storyline.
Well, and I think they had to, because in a lot of the interviews and things
Mm-hmm.
that there were with, if you read into anything Julia Quinn has said about
Yes.
Penelope Feather, she did not develop her as a character. She used her as a vessel to show that the Bridgerton men were nice. So she was a character that was always used to that, where they could show that they didn't like bullies, or they could show that they were nice, and then that showed the female heroine of the tale that she's, the guy she's crushing on is a nice guy.
And it's so to show that they are willing to marry below their status, because in the books, Penelope's family are not titled. They are not Baron, Baroness. They are completely untitled. They are just a wealthy family in society.
Yeah.
Which Bridgerton don't really touch on this, but that was completely normal. You had your inner circle in the ton who were given status, and then you had your people on the outskirts. Like, keep in mind, the Danbury family were one of those wealthy families on the outskirts of the ton, but we're not technically an inner circle until they were granted title.
Yes, he was a very wealthy person.
She was wealthy as well.
Yeah, she came from a wealthy family in Africa.
Sierra Leone.
Sierra Leone, thank you. I'm like, I know they've mentioned it.
It's because it's a song.
But yeah, I'm like, I know they mention it, but it's not coming to my brain. But yeah,
hey,
like,
it is a rare day when I have the information and you don't.
Yeah, somebody else just told me today, like, you remember details like nobody's business. And I'm like, on a good day. Sometimes I just glitch. But yeah, like, they both had impressive wealth, but they didn't get title till it was bestowed upon them. But there is a lot of, and in most Regency writing, you have titled people, you have landowners, like people who've made enough money where they could purchase land, and they manage to get into Parliament, but they're still just a mister. So, and that's just the misters that made money and could be a part of society and get invited were still considered good matches for your like third or fourth daughter,
This happens in one of these Smythe Smith books. So for those who don't know, Julia Quinn has created many books within this universe. We've got the Bridgerton main 8 books. You then have another side stories book, that Happily Ever After, which includes a little tale about Edmund and Violet, which is just beautiful. We then have the Brokesby series, the Smythe Smith series, the Bevel Stokes series, and I think that's the only ones that are all within the same. She has a few other series as well, but I think those are the only ones that are all within the same universe, and they sort of a little bit touch within each other. The Smythe Smith series runs parallel to the Bridgerton series though, and in that series, hopefully I'm not spoiling this for anyone who does care to listen, but one of the lords tries to get married off very quick because his younger sister is pregnant to an illegitimate father. Not that he knows who the father is. And then the wife, who marries on not realizing, hey, you're taking on a kid that's not going to be yours. She says, well, why can't you just grant this man title? He's already working on your farm. He is brilliant at doing it. Why not just grant him title and basically giving him legitimacy to marry your sister? Then they can have their own child. And I'm like, why is it that these men come up with these ridiculous concocted ideas, and a woman comes along and is like, can't we just do this? And he's like, oh, well, that's a bit too reasonable.
That's a bit
reasonable.
Yeah, that sounds sensible.
And a whole book transpires of this man and his ridiculous concocted ideas and plans, and a woman comes along and she was like, well, what about this? Well,
like, I mean, I completely described Colin's whole plan to get Penelope to tell him her feelings, because his feelings do not matter unless he knows her feelings. And I was like, that meme with the guy who has, like, he's got all of the Post-its and the papers and the yarn and the tag.
The whole police investigation. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's like, that's Colin's plan. Like, if he goes down a specific path and something fails, like, it all just falls apart like a house of cards, which is exactly what happens, because he makes the mistake of telling Eloise. Yeah, like most romance novels are like that though, where, especially a female gaze one, where the man comes up with this weird concocted thing and the whole book plays out, and that's the conflict, and then the woman's like, well, we could have just done this. Let's just do this now.
Yeah, so let's talk a little bit about the changes that they're going to make, that what they're going to have to make. So for starters, their first time happens on a sofa. And a sofa is basically a settee. They can't be like, oh no, Penelope lost it on a settee, but Sophie loses it on
On
a
that
sofa.
whole scene in the book is smack dab like the way Benedict is thinking plays out in the mirror scene in
Yes.
season 3.
Yeah.
Like wanting it to be perfect, wanting it to be tender for her, struggling with his own desire to tamper back to make sure it's good for her. All like every bit of it plays out. So like don't, if you're wanting to read about the mirror scene from Romancing Mr. Bridgerton, which was only a comment he made during their first time, your best bet is to go to Offer from a Gentleman and read their first time, because that's actually Colin and Penn's first time. Just add in the mirror. Yeah, add in the mirror, and it's so they're gonna have to change their first time, which with Colin and Penn in Romancing Mr. Bridgerton, they end up in a huge argument, and he takes her up the servants' staircase. The private staircase is how they got to the private terrace at the masquerade ball. Anyway, so all the brothers know about the private stairs, the hidden stairs. So he takes her up the hidden stairs to be able to go hash out this argument in the privacy of his bedroom. But then things turn because he's in his bedroom with Penelope alone, and she's going to leave, and he realizes he loves her, and he holds out his hand and grabs her hand and asks her to stay. So I have a feeling that Benedict and Sophie's first time is going to be similar to that. Like,
yeah, I think they could,
because Benedict Benedict does not have bachelor lodgings. He stays at Bridgerton House in the show. So I have a feeling that to escape her fear of Araminta recognizing her, him not knowing why she's so upset, he's going to take her.
Ooh, now that, because we know that they like to reuse sets that they already have, I wonder if the reason that they've also put Penelope and Colin into Featherington House is so that Benedict can have the bachelor lodgings, and it is now going to be the true love nest of three generations of love nest.
Bridgerton bros. Bridgerton all had a lady up in that set.
Bridgerton bros romp room.
Colin will be like, "You dare touch that. That's my mirror.
And
Don't you dare."
And then Sophie's like, "Hey, why is the leg on the settee broken?" Penelope's like, "Don't ask about it.
Don't say something funny when I have a mouthful of fluid. I'm gonna spit all over my computer." But yeah, for real. Like, why is this furniture broken?
Yeah.
Then so you just a letter shows up. They get the letter, and you just open it up, and it's in Colin's hand. It says, "Don't touch the mirror. We still plan on bringing it to the house." That's
our foreplay mirror. Don't you touch it.
Yeah, for real. And my wife was naked in front of that mirror. Don't touch it.
It has seen things that you cannot see. It has absorbed the memories.
I put a curse on it. Don't touch it.
I really hope that we get that mirror, because you know how we got the whole scene this season of how they have reorganized the Bridgerton main room in the house for Anthony and Kate. And they've done it in very much an amalgamation of their two styles. I hope that we get that in the Featherington house for Penelope and Colin. And I hope that that mirror is really a pivotal point of that room. This is how I see you. Always remember how I see you. This is how you should see yourself. Like that beautiful reminder.
Like it's in a lot of I saw a home decorating show where they wanted a big sign like that they had to see when they walked in. Like when they walked out, it was like a way that says it was on a mirror. So you had to see your face. You saw it. And it was, "Today's a good day to have a good day." And so I think it would be like, you know, if the mirror was placed, I mean, let's not get gross, people. It doesn't always have to face, which I thought was funny that because we know Colin set up their marital home and that mirror was facing the bed, even though it was over in the still. But yeah, I think that like it would be very sweet to, or if they just have a marital thing, they're getting ready for the day and they get ready to, he's like, "Don't forget yourself." It'd be very like an every day grow old together thing that hubby Colin.
Let's talk about the less sweet things then. Let's talk about the sour. So every Julia Quinn book really has its problematic moments, and I play that out to, I kind of justify it that it was written as a product of its time, and it was also written for a different time period. So it had two different things going on with it. And in those times, things were very different. So we've already had huge fan backlash from what happens with Daphne and Simon in season 1 from both Simon and Daphne's perspective. We have a lot of backlash for season 2 for some of like how they made that play out. But they also took away a lot of the angry moments from season 3. So in the books, Colin was angry a lot to the point where he physically hurts Penelope in one scene. And I don't say hurts as in like hits or anything like that. But in this book, Sophie hits Benedict, I think twice. Like she full on punches him.
Yeah, there's a lot of she throws the candle holder. Yeah. Remember, she picks up the spoon and he says, "Don't throw that spoon." Like he knows she wants to throw it. And that, so she even says like she watches herself do it, but she doesn't feel like it's her. And she picks up the candlestick holder and hurls it at him.
And then she punches him.
She punches him. She punches him. He punches the warden. He chokes out Airman. Like there's a lot of like.
Yes. So he. In the scene of
and Violet and Araminta get into it, although I still to this day I want to see Violet punch in the same way Daphne does, because I would love it if we find out that the Bridgerton brothers did not teach her how to punch, but her mother did.
So is it wrong that I'm like, you cannot have in 2024 Benedict choking out a partially elderly lady? And when she's not elderly, but she's of age.
Would be very mad at you calling her elderly.
Well, I mean, she deserves it. She's a win.
Yeah.
And I mean, even Benedict notes that she is very attractive for her age, but that that when she frowns, how deep her frown lines go and how unattractive that makes her, which I really love that kind of. But when he was describing her, I was getting very Lady Tilly vibes from his description, except she doesn't have children. But I was like, you're describing an older woman who still maintained like a great beauty and an elegance, held herself in a way and was very assertive and very, I was like, oh, and this reminds me of someone.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah, so I hope, nothing ever eventuates between that. But yes, so you cannot in 2024 have Benedict, a 6'1". I think Luke Thompson's about 6 foot, 6'1", somewhere. Not that height matters at all. You cannot have a male grabbing a female by the throat.
In the books, Benedict is the tallest. In the books, Benedict is the tallest, but of the Bridgerton bros on the show, Luke Newton is the tallest. Yeah, so Colin's the tallest.
Yes.
Not that matters. I mean,
they're all over 6 foot anyway.
We've never seen Araminta really stand next to any of them.
Araminta's quite tall. She looks tall.
And Cressida is super tall. So
I would imagine, I haven't actually looked into it, but I do imagine that she would be of like maybe Norwegian descent or somewhere in that region, because they do tend to be very beautiful, blonde, tall.
She's very
Scandinavian, very stronger structure. Yeah,
Rosamund was the same, but Posey was dark hair and whatever. But because Penelope Featherington was not a fleshed out character, I think the show took Posey and put her personality traits onto Penelope in the show, like the
kind eyes kind of comment that was a Posey thing.
Yeah. And also not being like her sister. Her sister was truly the mean one, and she wanted to be kind. She was just stuck in a family that
she didn't know how to stand up to her mum.
Right. And her awkwardness at the social functions is very, very Penelope-esque show. So I think they took her personality, and because I don't see us really having a Posey.
No, we won't.
I don't think we're going to have a Posey. I think Araminta is Araminta and
so
Cressida is Rosamund.
Let's talk further about the things that we think they're going to change, and then we're going to go into what we already know and predictions for the next season. Because there was some other things that I thought they're going to have to change. They're going to have to obviously change how the scene plays out with Colin and Benedict, because Colin and Benedict end up in a fencing match in which Colin essentially calls out Benedict like, do you really like society that much? Like, I would quite happily escape most of society. And Benedict's like, well, why should I listen to you? You're unmarried. You're this young stud. You've got no life experience. And then he looks at his brother and realizes, oh, my brother has grown up and now we are equal. prequels, but we've already kind of had that play out last season. So I think that scene is going to change up a little bit, but I think it's actually going to be even more beautiful because Colin now does have his lovely wife, Penelope. And I actually really like the scenes between Penelope and Sophie in the books because Penelope is one of the ladies, one of the few people that clocks her like, I know your face. You may deny it, but I know you, more so than most other people. Other people.
Well, and because in the show, most people clock Colin as being obtuse. You hear sarcasm dripping to say that. My guess is that they're going to have Penelope clock her. Penelope's going to kind of figure out or realize who she is in some way. And therefore Colin. So when he ends up having this conversation with Benedict, it's going to be more of a kind of like a similar experience kind of thing. Like I spent so much time from around my marriage, like it's tainted with this whole experience of being worried about her identity causing an issue for the family and causing like us to not be able to be in society. And I know how much she loves society and all that stuff. And ultimately in the end, all that's mattered to two of us. And if you're the same way, like if you love her, all that matters is her and you and your love. And I think that's how they change that up, is they have him use his experience with, because in the drawing room where Eloise says, the family will be fine. And he turns and he says, do you believe that? Like he really does think this Whistledown thing is going to hurt the Bridgerton family. And that's what's been the most important thing. Like, don't besmirch the Bridgerton name for Colin. So I think that with this experience, since Colin had this experience first, and Benedict already is like, this will blow over. He's really much that easygoing, very much that easygoing person, that I think he's going to get caught up in Sophie, and he's going to be like really concerned with not so much himself, because he's really not all about society. He plays the game, but he's going to be concerned about how this will reflect on the family. And it's going to have to be Colin of all people say matter. It doesn't matter.
What I'm curious about now is how they're going to have Benedict's artistry kind of be encouraged by Sophie, because obviously the family already know that he's an artist, whereas in the books, they were completely unaware. It was a complete secret. He'd never ever shown a single soul in his life any of the renditions that he had done. And it wasn't until that he was unconscious that Sophie kind of rifled through them, and then he, once was conscious, actively showed her them anyway. But it is very much Sophie who champions him to pursue art as a career.
And I think the encounter with her, because he has put down his pencil, he's put down his paints, because remember, Sophie also encourages him to paint when he had only done sketches up to this. So I think that his encounter with her re-inspires him, because he is so desperate to find her and he is so consumed by her that he must paint her. Because remember, she finds the picture of her.
I cannot wait for that.
Yeah. So I think the encounter with her inspires him, like to get her image out of his brain, kind of like, podcast, TikTok kind of things, to get the things out of your brain that you just can't get out of your brain. You find a means of creativity to put that energy into. And I think he will feverishly start, not for the world to see by any means, because it is Benedict Bridgerton and he doesn't understand his own talent, but he is going to very much start painting again because of needing to see her image. He's going to need to see her image when he doesn't have her anymore. And he's going to start drawing and painting. And I just see like a whole montage of his bedroom, like as pictures of her, more pictures of her accumulate, not saying that's what I want the time lapse to be. The time jump is going to be pollen on every surface of their home. Netflix, Shondaland, and Jess Brownell. I'm telling you, that's what the fans want.
Yeah, what we want and what we get, it doesn't always go hand in hand.
We deserve the happy pollen years.
I swear, I think they hate us at points. I'm like, why you put us through this?
We deserve happy pollen. And what better way to show time pass than the two writers writing together, having their writing interrupted all the time with their passion. Pen getting pregnant again, watching her be pregnant, watching Colin be Colin while she's pregnant, having another kid. Perfect way to do a time jump. And it'll only take all of maybe 5 minutes. You can do everything you need to do in 5 minutes.
This plays into one of my predictions for next season is in this season, we saw Colin's book, and they changed the name of the book from the
An
series.
Englishman in.
And yeah, beforehand, it was an Englishman in Scotland, an Englishman in Cyprus, and so on and so forth. This one, they have renamed in the TV series, they have renamed his book series to being Traveling with Myself. I really, really, truly hope that they have him traveling through Scotland, where he goes to go and collect Eloise from Kilmartin Estate. I really hope that they rewrite the next book together. They write the next book together and they name it Traveling with My Wife. And we get to see Penelope and Colin sitting over a desk. I mean, I hope they're sitting over a desk. But
or she's sitting on his lap at the desk.
Sort of the implications there. But that's one of my predictions that I really, really hope comes true, because it feeds into their storyline. It meets up with everything that they need, for the next season. It doesn't really retract away from the main season, but it still gives us an update of what they're doing, where they're at, where they're heading towards as a couple. So I think that'll be a great. Jess Barnell, please listen. Please listen to the fans. We know what we're talking about.
At least these two fans. We have great ideas.
Yes. Now let's talk about what we know, and then we're going to move on to our seer abilities of what we think might happen for next season. So firstly, let's talk about who we know is returning and who we already know won't be returning. So we know that our lovely Jonathan Bailey has said that he will be returning for season 4, which is an amazing thing, because we did not.
Simone Ashley said as well.
Yeah, perfection. So Jonathan Bailey has specifically said, I have set aside a few weeks in my calendar. Now, Jessie Bessie, which is not her name, but my brain always moves Jessie and Bessie together. Bessie Carter has stated it takes a week to film any scene. It takes a week. So if we have Jonathan Bailey only returning for a few weeks, we will likely only get a few snippets of him. But honestly, I'm willing to take anything that he's willing to give us, even if it's just 2 or 3 scenes. Please, please, please let one of those scenes be formal. Secondly,
Bridgerton bro scene. We gotta have a Bridgerton bro scene, but we have a Bridgerton bro scene. They're just gonna have to have some other conversation.
Well, we want more,
because it can't be that I'm not gonna marry Penelope Featherington, which this is and it upsets me that. I mean, personally, there's plenty of people on the interwebs who say you can go back into season 1 and season 2 and you can see Benedict absolutely clocking Colin and Penelope and their feelings for each other. And this plays in where he sees Colin's awkwardness and how upset he gets that Penelope's upset. And he sees right in Penelope's eyes that she loves Colin. He even makes the comment, like Anthony says, oh my gosh, you guys are going to be married and I give it a year. And Benedict's like, nah, I think it'll be 2 years. Like they both said he was going to marry Penelope Featherington in that conversation. And so I think it needs to be something funny, like we knew you're going to marry her or something.
Yeah. But what's interesting, Anthony was not present in this book one little smidgen.
True. It's not.
And I don't know why, because I mean, granted,
he was just in that scene.
Yeah, just that. Just
him
in that
Colin
one scene.
Walk up. Oh, and the masquerade ball. But you just know he's there.
But we don't get any
doesn't interact.
Interaction.
Yeah. You just know he's there.
We know that we also have Pollen returning. Both Nicola Coughlan and Luke Newton have said that they will be returning for season 4.
How dare you glitch on Luke's name? How dare you?
Which Luke? Which Bennett? Which Bridgerton?
Yeah. Luke.
I mean, to be fair, in the Bridgerton Pages matrix, there are so many Lukes at this point that do you really blame me for getting confused?
Well, and Luke Newton finally put out a statement. You see that?
No, I didn't.
People were posting it in the groups about how he said, I heard there's a lot of people impersonating me. I'm not going to ask for money. This is my only social media account, that sort of thing. But yeah, so seriously, Luke Newton, if you ever listen to this podcast, we call them flukes and we think
Luke Newton.
We think it's funny. And we actually collect them like Pokemon. Like I've been Bridgerton broed. I've had all 3 like or comment on a comment I've made.
Poor Gregory. Why is no one imitating Gregory?
Yeah. Because we've seen a fake Golda. There's been a fake Golda. We have denied several Luke Newtons and at least 2 Nicola Coughlin's in our own Facebook group. I've seen a fake Golda. I've seen a fake
Penelope
Adjua.
Featherington.
Yeah, Penelope Featherington. Like, you couldn't even pick the real life actress's name. You had to do the character. Like, whatever, dude. You're like, that's the person that's like, they didn't graduate scammer school.
Nope. He went to the school of Nigerian princes.
For real. But yeah, most of us out there know it's fake and we've turned it into a game.
Yeah. Oh, you know what would be interesting? What's the bet? We are going to very shortly going to have a whole bunch of Yeren Haas trying to join the group.
Probably.
Which brings us to our next point, that we are very tentatively saying that we have potentially had our Sophie Beckett cast by a lovely Korean Australian heritage actress named Yeren Ha. Now, no one official has come out from Shondaland, from the Bridgerton University thing, that has actually explicitly stated that Yeren Ha will be part.
That it was announced by Variety and
every major news. Like, I've seen Elle magazine, I've seen Variety, I've seen BuzzFeed, which obviously is far less reputable, but there are so many. That's why I said far less reputable. But I've seen so many places kind of. Elle magazine is reputable. Elle is very reputable. So for them to repost this information, they would not have done it. They would not, without doing their due diligence. Hey, can you ensure to me that this is a reputable source that you've gotten this information from? They would never post without that. So the projects that...
And I'm going with, she's a fantastic choice.
Well, the projects that she is cast for doing... She was in an Aussie TV show called Reef Break. So I know that she definitely has probably a thick Aussie accent. Mine's a Kiwi Aussie accent, so mine's a real mongrel mix. But having an Aussie accent, I think, gives us a little bit of an edge on doing a British accent compared to, say, an American. But I think they've very specifically chosen a native English speaker over otherwise, because a lot of the Old English is quite hard to pronounce, and you even hear Luke Newton coming in and out of it a little bit sometimes, and even occasionally Nicola Coughlan, you can catch that slight Irish kind of flair to some of her words. It's very, very difficult to stay in the Old English language all the time. But Yeren Ha is also known for projects like Halo. She played a I love that her name is Kwan Ha in Halo, same last name. But the Halo series was quite popular. She was in it for 17 episodes. And then most notably of her upcoming projects is also, I believe she's been cast to play in the new June Prophecy movie. And that's huge. Anything in June, to be cast in June, you know it's going to be good. Because, I mean, I'm personally not the biggest fan of it, but my husband is absolutely obsessed.
Americans, she's saying Dune.
Sorry, I'm Australian. We say June because it's the dunes, the sand dunes. Head down to the sand dunes.
We have this conversation several times, how it's Junes over there and we say Dune.
And then because my husband has listened to an American read out the audiobook so many times, he'll come in and be like, oh, rah, 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 in Dune. And I'm like, I don't know what he's talking about. And he's like, June. I'm like, oh, lovely. What do you want to talk about June about? So she is also cast to be in the June 3rd installment movie. So that's quite big. So, I mean, I think it'd be brilliant. I think that a Korean Australian actress alongside our lovely Luke Thompson is going to be spectacular. I know that not everyone cares for change because she's meant to have light brown hair and very fair skin. Come on, no one in any of these series has realistically been cast the way that we envision in our minds. Very, very few. Penelope was meant to have brown hair with a slight red tinge to it. She is a flaming redhead.
Yeah, Portia's red is a little more what I would have envisioned.
Yeah, more of a
book. Yeah, it's a brown. It's more of a brown auburny color.
Yeah,
I would probably say Luke Newton is how I would picture Colin.
Luke Thompson has the smile that Sophie constantly comments on, the lopsided smile that just makes you go a little bit funny in the tummy. He has that down pat. And I think they cast him just on that smile alone because it is perfection.
Well, and Luke Newton is very much like, because Colin in the book is very charming, and it talks about his smile a lot. It's like, it's more like a smirk and kind of like like that he's plotting or scheming and with this certain smile. And I think Luke Newton has that. Like, I seriously want, because I was rereading Romancing Mr. Bridgerton. I don't know how it happened because when I bought all the books on Kindle, I started reading, or I read Romancing Mr. Bridgerton. I finished it. And then I started Benedict's book so that we could do this. And for some reason, the one night I was like, oh, I'm going to read some before I go to bed. And it was popped up as Romancing Mr. Bridgerton. Like maybe there was an update and it just went back to what I had been on before. And it was the scene where they are going to Eloise's wedding and they're going to tell, because in the books, Eloise is the last to know about Penn being whistled down. And they're going back and forth about whether they tell her on her wedding day. Penn doesn't want to tell her on her wedding day. Colin wants to tell her because he bribed Hyacinth not to tell her because he knew Hyacinth would. And he only gave her half the money and said she'd get the other half when they knew she didn't tell her. Like this whole thing, which is hilarious and very Hyacinth.
Colin is a chaos king. He wants the chaos.
But the best part is like after the wedding's over and they're kind of doing the party part, the reception part, he pulls his wife aside and he's like, you want to make some mischief, because he's ready to tell, like, and she goes, no, we said we're gonna wait. And he goes, and she's like, why did you change your mind? And he goes, because this person, pointing to himself, doesn't want to hold it in anymore. Like this person cannot, like, and he's like, I want to make some mischief. And he keeps saying that. And then Penelope thinks he's talking about mischief, spicy mischief. She's like, not now. And he's like, I didn't mean that, but I love that your mind went there. And then he goes, by the way, what is the soonest we can leave this shindig? And like, I want that so bad. I think it'll be I want to see Colin like want to make mischief and her to be like, Colin, no, like, Colin, what are you doing? Because in season 3, she was always like, Colin, what are you doing? Like, I just want to be like, Colin, what are you doing?
Well, you know what the funny thing is? Listening to the audiobooks, the way that Penelope says Colin in the series is the way that Eloise says Colin in the audiobooks.
Yeah.
Which I thought was quite funny. Yeah, so the things that we know is we know that there's going to be a masquerade ball. They've already talked about that in the last season. In one of the very last scenes, we have Benedict and Eloise talking about the masquerade ball. So we know that we are going to get those scenes at least, which is going to be like, it is a dress-up party and a masquerade ball. So I really hope that Penelope doesn't get dressed as the leprechaun.
Well, I think because Posey doesn't exist, I think she might be the mermaid. Because Posey was a mermaid.
Mermaid was also supposed to be one of the most unfortunate outfits. But mermaid, we had Philippa and Prudence dressed in very mermaidy inspired kind of color tones
at the butterfly ball.
Yeah, at the butterfly ball. So I don't think they're going to go down that path, but I'm really excited for this masquerade ball because the last few balls, as they've been talking about in the books, some of them start getting a little bit stale where they don't seem as exciting to me anymore as like the first season. Rewatching it now with my husband, like there's just an absolute magic about some of I love the ones that are set outside, with the misty and the moonlight and the lights and the candles, and it's just really spectacular. And I really hope that the masquerade ball kind of goes back to its roots of.
Well, and I think because, we've talked about how the balls play into the love interest season, and with Benedict being sexually fluid and things like that, I think the masquerade ball is more going to be, we're going to see maybe some play with gender. Not knowing necessarily a lady is a lady with some people or a man is a man kind of thing, because it is a masquerade. It's a costume party. So there's going to be some play there because you're not supposed to be able to recognize the
They've
person.
already said that she will be the lady in silver. So they are going to keep
I'm not talking about her.
Mm.
I'm not talking about her because, yes, she's going to be the lady in silver for sure. But I also think they're going to play up for longer when he rescues her from that situation and they get caught in the rain. She has no clothes. I think something's going to happen to her clothes and she has to wear men's clothes. I think because like Luke Thompson is a Shakespearean actor. And they always tend to have a theme. So I'm predicting, like, I think their theme is going to be like 12th Night, the Shakespearean play where the sister has to dress up like a man to go over, like they're having to go on a ship on a journey, and to keep her safe they dress her up as a man. So I think that's going to be something similar, like to keep her safe. Like maybe they over dramatize the whole Araminta thing for a while and she has to dress as a man, and that doesn't stop Benedict one dang bit because he's fine.
I desperately want the scene of Sophie trying to bring the tea service to Benedict's side and her britches falling going down around her ankles.
Right. Well, what I want is because he's super sick still, and he's all mad that he can't get up and go see it. I want this thing to be like, if she wears these clothes longer than necessary, like he's starting to get better and he's staying in the bed. And like, that's kind of how the audience sees that he's getting better, because he gets up to watch her like,
well, that is basically
carry stuff.
What, like, he knows he's better because he's getting like way more, I'm getting hornier by the day, essentially. And he's like,
I am
don't
attracted to her.
And that is why he literally has to go all the way out to the pond, because he's like, he's got this tea service on his lap and he's like, if I get any harder, it's gonna fall off my lap.
The cookie plate, and she reaches for the last cookie and he's like,
you cannot reach
take the
plate. He's like, if she
do not take this plate.
It is the only thing hiding my innocence right now.
It's the only thing keeping you innocent right now is this plate.
Yeah, it's his what do they call it back? Chastity belt.
The chastity cookie plate.
Yep. So what else we know about the next season is there is going to be a time jump.
They're going to have a time jump.
They're going to have a time jump. And it's also...
we already know, because they said they're not killing off the queen.
Yes. So we know that the queen is going to be bypassing her lifespan and she's going to continue on. She's going to outlive us all. Maybe she's drinking the blood of the Pomeranians, like...
Or in like, what was that? Snow White and the Huntsman, where Charlize Theron like bathes in that milky blood stuff.
Yeah. No, I was thinking of Harry Potter with the blood of the unicorn. It gives you but a half-life.
Yeah, I was going with the witchy queen, old fairy tale-y type thing.
So the other part that's going to be very fun this season, and because we've had 3 seasons of the debutante season, next season we are not going to have a debutante season. It's not going to be taking place in spring. We're going to have this next season set in fall, which means that we're going to get a lot of fall colors. They said they will still continue in some of those lighter romantic pastels, but predominantly we're going to be seeing a lot more of those oranges, the reds, the browns, more subdued colors that they wear in the countryside, rather than the glitzy, glammy romance of what we've had of the rom-com season that we've just had. But it's also going to change up the entire structure.
And I think it's going to start at the end of the season, because I think that the masquerade ball is going to be considered like how the butterfly ball was the last ball of the season, supposedly, which makes no sense because the way the timing of the season went, like it started at the beginning of April, it ended in June, and they're trying to claim it went all the way till fall, but it didn't.
What's interesting is the masquerade ball was Violet's last hurrah in Bridgerton House before she moves out to Bruton Street. I don't see them moving out to Bruton Street, though, because they will not want to find a whole new set.
No, I think that she's going to, and well, the word on the street is that the actor that played Anders not coming back. That is also not
so what I actually think, what I think that is I think that when that rumor came about, they were still in talks of contracts. And so they were talking about contracts and payments and all those things. And I think it somehow got out that, he's not returning. I think they've done
They were still in negotiations.
They've done way too much background work with Lord Anderson, talking about love and second acts, talking about the gardening and the prospects. He's not in it for a good time, because otherwise he would have gone with Lady Keswick or one of the other ladies that his sister threw at him. He did not want that. He wanted Violet and he wanted love with her.
But they also have the out, though, with Lady Danbury saying, if he sours things between you, I will choose you over him. So there was an out. If there wasn't a contract in place, if they... because a lot of times, knowing they're going to have a future season, so coming into season 3, they knew they were already signed for 3 and 4. So they could have easily negotiated a contract for 2 seasons for him. So we don't know. Like, it could be that they're saying like there's no negotiated contract, and there may not be for season 4, because he signed on for 2 seasons when he negotiated his contract to come in for season 3. We don't know. We're not in the room where it happened. So it's possible, but I mean, the rumor on the street is that he's not coming back. But there's either going to be like she leaves Bridgerton House to go live with him and marry him or whatever. But I also think like,
I don't know that she will until her children are married off.
Well, unless
Bruton Street,
years.
5 Bruton Street could be their married house in town. That could be one that they purchase together. And what I say together, I mean, like, obviously Violet's not putting in money to
he
it.
has a house somewhere because he's not like he snuck in
No,
the
no,
day
no.
of the wedding.
He's staying because Lady Danbury says, I have an unwelcome guest. And it's just that he
Right.
sneaks into her private room that isn't allowed for other guests, and that's just like her space. And he knew that.
I
I think he's
see.
staying at the residence because, you know, he's dining with her every day. And he says, you know, in the countryside, my housekeepers are the only people I get to converse with. And she's like,
Entertain, yeah. Yeah, I
yeah,
know
but
he was staying with her, but that one threw me off because he's like, don't yell at your
I
footman.
I
And
think it's just
she
a
said
private
the line
room.
about I really need to speak with them about the guests, like
Yes.
who they let in. And it's like, okay, so what did you do? Kick him out? I didn't see that happen.
No. So I think they might. I mean,
But I
they
think it would be
could.
hilarious because Featherington House is pretty big. We know it has two masters. I'm not going to say suites because there's not indoor plumbing. But there's two masters because Lord Featherington had his own space and Portia had her own space. And then all three girls had their own bedroom. And yes, we know we have one child, but those rooms are on the floor of like all the bedrooms are where adult children go because usually there's rooms off of the
The
nursery for when they're
nursery. Yeah.
younger in those kind of houses. So they still have rooms off of a nursery on probably like a third floor because they're definitely like 3-floor home that I think it would be hilarious. Hilarious. I know it's not rom-com anymore, but I would love to see Violet and having I think that would be so
Don't do that to Violet. She will get married off just specifically like Penelope to avoid that future.
She'll be like, "Where's dabbling? I'll marry that man."
She's like she goes to Genevieve and she goes, I need a new outfit. Portia's starting to talk about us taking care of each other in our old age, and I cannot do it. I only want a I only want a sensible match.
Yeah. Penelope and Colin are going to take care of their mamas. Like, although Portia doesn't necessarily deserve it, like, Penelope is seriously the one that's going to take care of her. And we know Colin is the mama's boy and he's going to take care of his mother. So I just think it would be super. I mean, I already think it's going to be funny enough. Like, I think Portia thinks she's going to butt heads with Colin over the estate, but I think that Colin and Penn are going to run the estate together because they're a power couple. And he's going to be like, nope, we have to run this through my wife. And then Portia's going to be like, crap, like Penelope's never going to let me do this.
Portia actually really respects the fact that Colin was able to stand up to her and like, okay, I can see that you're actually ready to take on this responsibility. I'm handing the reins over to you because you are capable. She could never do that with Dankworth or Finch, like as lovely as they are.
She did not respect them at all. Yeah.
No, she liked them, but she didn't respect them. It's different. So let's talk about our Featherington bros. We know sadly that they are not returning for next season, which is an absolute heartbreak because there are many.
Bye, Finchy.
There are many Albion Finch stands out there. So this is heartbreaking because it also means that it's very likely we will not have our favorite comedy queens returning, which is Philippa and Prudence.
They've both said in their social medias, and Bessie Carter already has a new show.
Yeah. So goodbye to the Featherington bros and sisters. We enjoyed you thoroughly. You were brilliant.
Yes, we loved you. You brought us joy.
You brought us so much joy and much confusion. Let's move on to our premonitions for next season. Now, I want to start this one out. This is a Tasha original. I don't have a Patty Cannon cool name, but this is a Tasha original. So in the very start of this book.
You have Tasha's notes. We just said that because of writing out the synopsis of the book. Instead of Cliff's notes, it's Tasha's note.
Tasha's note. In the start of this book, we have Benedict attending a party of a man that he's not particularly friends. He says it's a friend of a friend of a friend situation. Who's a friend of a friend or a friend of a brother, particularly?
Couple of brothers, yeah.
Couple of brothers. Well, I wouldn't say Colin is friends. He's associated with. Now,
I don't think he's friends with them at all anymore because Fife was at the stag night and never once approached, ever.
Yes. So, Lord Squad, our famous Lord Squad, douche squad, whatever you want to refer to them,
But Lord Squad equals douche squad at this point.
Lord Squad is said in a very facetious way of, Lord, you are a douche. So I truly believe that instead of having Philip Cavendish, because I don't think they're going to want to sully the name Philip when it's going to be obviously used for Sir Philip the next season, because I do believe it will be Eloise's next. So I believe very much so that we are going to have the Lord Squad. Instead of it being hosted by Philip Cavender, it is going to be Lord Fife, because he has very much been established over the last few seasons as a very poor moral character. He has a whole bunch of friends around him who are very that drunken, debaucherous, not interested in settling down. He has been going on his overseas travels, their grand tours overseas, and getting a experience. And I
And they talk
very
about
much,
women like they're
they are objects
for
yes.
their entertainment. They're not real people.
And the problem with Philip Cavender from the book was he did not believe that. So he's like, well, I pay for Sophie, or my family pays for Sophie, therefore she is there for my disposal to do with whatever I shall
she
wish.
has to do what I say because we pay her.
Yeah, so I very much believe that the event that is going to transpire at the very start of the season is going to be between Fife, Wilding, and Stanton, or some culmination of some of those lords whom we've seen around Anthony, we've seen around Colin, we've seen being not very stand-up men in society. And I can very much see
Cho's married off. Yeah, Cho's married off, so it's not going to be him. I don't think Basilio really belonged in the Lord Squad. I think he just chummed up with them. He chummed up with them at Danbury's ball to have reinforcements to talk to Francesca, I think, because he's the only one that really seemed interested. I think Wilding and Fife were playing around with her and Anthony, like just to get Anthony's goat. That was definitely Fife. And I can see, I think it will be, I don't know if it'll necessarily be Fife's parents' house. Fife is already Lord Fife, but I think that she might get a job there, like the housekeeper hires her and he's gone and then he comes back. But also he is going to spar verbally well with Benedict because he loves getting the goat of a Bridgerton.
But if he is drunk, and Benedict is a big, I mean, he's not like big, bulky big, but like he's a tall fella. I would not want to make him mad.
No, and really, Luke Thompson and the guy, I don't know the actor who plays Fife, but they're pretty much similar build and stuff like that. But Benedict in that scene is not drunk, and the three men really are. And I do think it's going to be Fife, Stanton, and Wilding, because those were the three that were at Mondrick's bar with Colin talking about the women on their travels. And so we already know they're icky, and we already know that, you know, when Colin says
Bert Seymour.
Fife.
Seymour. Yeah.
Bert Seymour. When Colin says what he says about having to be cavalier about the only thing in life that holds true meaning, don't you find it lonely? And they just laugh at him. That gives you everything you need to know about those three men. So I agree with you. I do think those three are going to be the ones that harass Sophie, and Benedict comes in to save the day.
Our next fan theory that we have of what may happen next season, I think it is too much of a coincidence for Araminta to have the name that she does, Araminta Kalpa,
and Cressida to look like Rosamund is described as.
Not just look like, Cressida has the absolute mean spirit like Rosamund, and everyone in society already knows. And it actually plays out well because in society, Araminta and Rosamund are not well liked. Rosamund has been on the marriage mark for multiple seasons, and everyone is kind of surprised by that because she's some great beauty, so she should have been married off fast. But everyone knows that they are social climbers, that they are very rude, unlikable, very snooty. They treat their staff very poorly. That is well known. Patty Cannon.
So we know, and we already read the synopsis, we know that in the end at the jail, who runs in to say that Araminta is lying? It's Benedict, Violet, and Posey. And we know from this season that they gave a backstory on Cressida. You got to see her home life. So you got to see how she became who she became. And you see towards the end that she's starting to feel remorse for calling out the Bridgertons in her whistle down that her mother wrote. Her mother absolutely fed on being able to knock them down a peg, but she was upset that she felt like she betrayed a person who was a true friend to her with Eloise. And so I think we're going to get a little bit of both. I think Cressida is the Rosamund, but I also think in the end she ends up being the Posey. I think that she just sees how cruel her mother really is. You know, her only out for herself, especially against women, to the point of betraying her own daughter. I feel like she didn't stand up for her daughter at all this season. So I think in this whole situation, that person that runs in to be a person within the home that says Arament is lying and who ultimately sacrifices herself and says she took the shoe clips or whatever is stolen, because they could change it up. It is Shondaland. That, you know, she sacrifices herself. And why would she do that? Because it is absolutely something she has learned from the Bridgertons, from even Penelope, that when you love somebody, when you care about them, you sacrifice yourself for them. So in the moment, like, Sophie turns out to be a real friend for her, which is, I really do think Sophie ends up coming from wherever she is in Wales, that they developed this relationship.
Cressida.
But
Cressida comes from wherever she is in Wales. Yeah.
No, I think Sophie's going to come from that area, like almost maybe be around Aunt Joanna, because Aunt Joanna's horrible too, because we already saw how Lord Cowper treated Cressida and how embarrassed he was and all that. That Sophie ends up coming out of the woodwork as his illegitimate daughter that Araminta didn't know about.
How would she have gotten all the less? I think
Aunt Joanna.
I don't think Aunt Joanna would have had an absolute bar of it.
But I think Aunt Joanna would definitely hide a byblow for her brother so that he could social climb. And he's probably paying her really well. And she's making sure that she is educated just in case she turns out like they could claim she's a ward later. I don't think Cowper is going to ever love her like the Earl in the book did. But I think something happens. Either Aunt Joanna dies or he dies or something happens and Sophie gets found out. But Sophie has been also living in this home. Cressida doesn't necessarily realize who she is, but they've developed a kind of friendship, and that creates, she ends up being Rosamond and Sophie kind of together, is ultimately what I see. Like, I think she comes in and she betrays her mother.
Well, I wonder whether, even though it's not going to be in the same sort of way, I wonder whether Penelope is going to play that kind of role of Posey, not as a sister, but just kind of in the background of it all, because it's the exact personality. And we're going to have Eloise and Penelope and all mixed in together.
Well, and I think that Penelope recognizing her, Penelope now being the head of the Featherington household, technically as the mama to the Lord, her and Colin, like a lot of the things that occur in the book that are like Lady Featherington and the maid wars and all of that is going to be Penelope dealing with it, right? Their intimate dinner party that they have that all the Bridgertons attend, but the Bridgerton brothers do not. I mean, I think it's going to switch up because obviously Colin's there. He lives in the home, but Benedict won't be there. And that'll be like, maybe, you know, we see there is a dinner party. And like, we're going to be using Featherington House set still. So we're going to have,
I don't think we are, because keep in mind that this is all going to be set during the off season. They're not going to be in London. They're going to be in the countryside. So how is all this going to play out?
Well, I think there's still, because the house that is Bridgerton House, not Aubrey Hall, the house that is Bridgerton House is signed off for 2 weeks in September.
2 weeks is not filming a lot, though.
No, it's not. But they're probably, I mean, they probably got 2 weeks now, and then if they need to do reshoots later,
I wonder if they go
their time.
Like all this transpires,
and then they go the Masquerade. I think the Masquerade is going to be in London at Bridgerton House, and then after the time jump, that ends up being off season, because everything that happened, it, aside from stuff that's mentioned in Whistledown, but if you look at the stuff that's mentioned in Whistledown during this book,
also doesn't take place during the off season. It's only during the on season.
Right. But we don't necessarily have Whistledown anymore. We have Penelope Bridgerton and her column, and we do not know how she's doing her column now that she's out and about. She may have a column all the time now, so we don't know. But nothing that was posted in the Whistledown in this book really had anything to do with like balls or anything, except the Masquerade Ball. All of it was like the maid wars, the intimate dinner party at the Featherington home, the jail, the constable getting called in front of Bridgerton House, Penelope being seen with the 3 Bridgerton brothers, which that part won't happen. But so there's nothing really about society anyway. So I think we can still have the narration from Penelope Bridgerton's column. And yes, Penelope will play in. I think Eloise will play in, because if Cressida is the Rosamond character, then there's going to be that. I think they're going to give Cressida a redemption arc where she gets to save the day. She'll sacrifice herself and save the day so that Sophie can be legitimized. And that is going to get her back in the good graces with Eloise. And I think we're going to end up having, kind of a friendship trio. I think Eloise and Penn and Cressida chum it up.
And let's talk a little bit more about Colin and Penn to finish off this podcast for the day and our predictions about Scotland and Sir Philip, because I truly believe Eloise hit her ball through wicket 5. Hers is going to be the 5th season. So I think...
Well, it has to be. They're not going to do Francesca next because they have to do a death and a year of mourning. We are going to have a time jump.
We're going to have a time jump. We've already had a year time jump. So in potentially 1 year, John will already be dead, but I think they'll kill him off in this upcoming season. Sorry to all those who've grown attached. FYI.
I really like Sir John.
I know it's really difficult because he's lovely.
Well, and honestly,
sorrows, prayers.
We know he's going to die because they had the minister look at him and say, until your dying breath.
Yes.
So we know he's going to die, but I don't know how that's going to play out. Well, but there is a line in Benedict's book that Violet says to Benedict that I think they might save for Francesca's season because it kind of fit more with what she would probably say to Francesca having a same-sex love interest.
Mm-hmm.
And it's basically about, I will always support you. I just want to know that, I want you to have love and all that. But it's going to be very difficult. It's going to be a challenge. You could be ostracized from society. Like this kind of advice she gives Benedict about Sophie's social standing, I think it might be safe because they do pick and choose from the different books. I think they'll take that Violet conversation and pass it off to Francesca in her story because it really does fit that
it does fit.
Situation more. It's Michaela and not Michael.
Yeah. All right. I
digress. Pollen.
But I think you are very much right that they are going to have the conversation that Violet and Benedict have in the season. I think they're going to use that. It does make way more sense for their season.
It works so well with when Francesca comes to her mother, like, what if the person I love is not what society expects of me or you expect of me or whatever. I think that advice from Violet works so much better for Francesca in that they'll pull that over.
Yeah, and then one other thing that we know that we're getting this season, and I can't fathom how it's going to play out, but Jess Brownell has said that we're going to still see Benedict exploring his sexuality in the season, and I wonder if that's going to happen in between the time jump of him meeting Sophie at the masquerade ball, and then
he looks for her for 6 months, and then he kind of tries to go back to his normal behavior to forget her. Like he's figured out like he's never going to find her. So I think that's what we're going to see. We're going to see like this solid 6 months of looking, and then he gives up. And I think he's going to go full tilt polyamory, like kind of like Colin with the brothels. Like I'm not getting the one thing I need, so I'm going to go for it all kind of thing.
What's interesting though, because in the book that I've just finished, when Benedict turns up to the party, he can hear men having sex with women in rooms, and that was the determining factor of him saying, I do not partake in these activities in such a public manner, Mr. I'm having orgies in everywhere. Like, come on.
Well, no, he technically only did it because she said her staff was
Sorry, when I was talking about orgies, he wasn't actually part of orgies. But he was at the artist parties.
Granville. Yeah,
at Granville, there was a lot of orgies in place, and there was a lot of so he has already been part of that scene. But in the books, he's like, no, this is not my scene, and he's leaving. And it's to kind of tell us book readers, this isn't his cup of tea. He is a gentleman, and he won't be partaking.
Which they gave that uber gentleman stuff to Colin. Yeah.
Yeah. And then, so heading back a little bit to Colin and Penn, we believe that Penelope and Colin are going to head to Scotland to go pick up Eloise for the masquerade ball. And on their way back from Scotland, they are going to stop at the Crane estate for whatever reason. I wonder whether Colin wants Penelope to apologize to Marina. And that is part of his, not in an angry way, but I think you need to make this right for us to fully move on from it.
Well, and I was thinking that it really becomes her idea.
And I think he also wants to thank Marina for telling him how much Penelope cared, because it sent him on the path to being with her in his mind.
Well, I think that it gave him enough confirmation to actually pursue, because I think that
because
he
he
had
knew his
tamped
feelings,
down.
but he didn't know her
Yeah,
feelings until Marina said it.
yeah, and he didn't really even then, because she just said, seek out the people that you already make happy. Like, you make Penelope happy. But what he ends up coming away with that, like,
She
a
likes
couple
me. She
weeks
really
later,
likes me.
she cares about me and she is never gonna forsake me. Like, he ruminated on that
he
for a
he
couple of
he
weeks.
got the daisies. She loves me. She loves me not. She loves me.
He turned that molehill into a mountain by the time he talked to her at that wedding.
Adorable
And
Colin.
very adorable. So I think because when he comes back from Marina's and he doesn't go to the ball and they end up talking on the stairs,
Mm-hmm.
she asks him very genuinely, how is she? And he says she's content. And you can see the relief on her face, because she
Yes.
knows
She
she
cared
changed the
about her.
course of her life. Yeah. And she changed the course of her life. And she was concerned that, because whereas she was just trying to terminate her pregnancy, she almost terminated her own life.
Yeah.
That Penelope didn't understand, didn't know if maybe this was a thing. And I think Penelope's like, if they have her taking her own life as a storyline, it's going to send Penelope in a tailspin, because Penelope found her the last time, and Penelope is probably going to go through this whole business of, I should have been here, or I should have come sooner, or all this mess. And I don't think we need that much drama in the Pollen life. So please just have her swim in that lake and get influenza.
I think she's just gonna either drown immediately or drown after the fact. But I hope, for Philip's sake of the trauma of it, I hope she just and he pulls her out, but it's too late. I hope they don't put him through the multi days of dry drowning, because it's a pretty awful experience.
That's horrific.
It's horrific. It's really like
But I
growing up
mean,
in
it's got to
Australia.
be traumatic enough, because part of Eloise's story is that he never wants the kids to go swimming, and they tell her they never get to go swimming anymore. They used to get to go swimming, but now they don't. And Eloise takes them swimming, and he has a conniption fit.
Yeah. So we think though that. Yeah, so they Penelope and Colin are going to take Eloise with them to visit the Crane estate, so that Penelope can.
Yeah, she's with them, so she
Yes.
meets Philip.
Yeah, so that Penelope can say her dues, they can make amends, move on. They arrive only to find out that Marina has passed away a few months before. I don't think they would do it like immediately after the fact. It would have been sometime since
the
she has
actress
passed.
playing Marina is not coming back. So unless they recast her, if they recast her, but I mean, so they're probably just not going to. I mean, they could always, when they visit, she could have taken to her room and not be willing to see visitors, because that occurred for the 8 years they were married in the books, where she would take to her room for weeks on end and claim headaches and all this stuff and just knock them out of her room.
For the time period for Eloise to have the next season, I think she will already have to be dead by the time that they arrive. So I think that's how that one's going to play out.
It depends. She's coming back for the Masquerade Ball, so that's only the next season. So then we have a 2-year time jump.
Mm-hmm.
So I think they could come. She could have taken to her room. She could be ill. She's developed some illness or whatever. They could have her die off with an illness too. It doesn't have to be suicide.
It would make more sense that if Eloise was spending time with her at the estate and she was alive, and then Eloise hears of her passing, it does make more sense if she was alive that Eloise would then write to him and say, I'm really sorry for your loss. I enjoyed my time with her. It would make more sense for her writing then, rather than why would she be writing?
In season 2, they already give the illusion, based on her conversation with Colin, and when she says, she's near here, that she writes to her, that they correspond.
Yes.
So they don't say definitively that they do or don't correspond. She just says, she lives near here. So they make it sound like they correspond. So she would have been possibly writing her all this time. I think that they're going to show up, whether she is already passed or alive or whatever. I personally think they're going to play it out like some sort of sparring of the minds, because he's very much into his own interests. She's very much into her own interests. And I think there's going to be that play back and forth. I've said this just in passing, just talking about it in our voice notes, that I would absolutely love a scene, because we know from the books, there's several mentions where Colin loves watching his wife read. And I think it would be great if they visited and Colin and Sir Philip are doing their thing, talking about plants and travel and whatnot. and Eloise and Penelope are just like letting them do their thing, and they're reading. They've both found books in the library. They're reading, and Colin, like Philip catches Colin watching his wife, and he's just like, I love watching. And Philip says something along the lines of, yes, I can see, like, she's very fetching, but you can tell he's talking about Eloise. Like, he says something about her.
And then I hope like that he said something, and this is from the book. I hope he says something like, I enjoy the time where your sister is quiet.
That would be awesome. Yeah, like I'm just enjoying that your sister.
That's straight from the book. He's like, she talks too much.
I mean, if there's a whole scene of them like over dinner, like those two going back and forth, like a Bridgerton dinner,
yeah,
those two going back and forth, and then the girls are reading, and he catches Colin looking over. He's like, I'm watching my wife.
Can you
read.
Imagine Colin?
I
with
just
the
love
twins?
your sister quiet.
Colin with the twins will be like,
and having their own kid too, though, like. They got their own kid in tow. That would be amazing.
All right. I think we need to wrap up before we start an entire season 5 series. Look, we're jumping.
We're writing our own Bridgerton.
We're scripting out our own season. So I think for today, gentle listeners, we hope that you have enjoyed this bonus episode, but we are going to leave it there and continue on our regularly scheduled next week's episode. If you have anything in particular you would like us to cover, or any Bridgerton knowledge you would like to share, please head to our Facebook page, The Ladies Bridgerton. And if you are enjoying our podcast, please remember to click follow on Spotify, Apple, or wherever you are listening. And we also really appreciate when you give our podcast a rating, as it helps to recommend us to other listeners. Once again, thank you for listening to the musings of two mad women. Yours truly, Tash the Kiwi.
And Lady Patty.